Stratus Foods is the industry partner you can depend on when you're looking for the very best in fats and oils. Our team of expert researchers, developers, and innovators have helped countless businesses just like yours bring their delicious menus to life. With products that are reliable, sustainable, and ready to meet any challenge, you can fry, bake, saute, and grill with confidence. Stratus Foods, we've got you covered.
Domino's refreshes its brand for the first time in over a decade. Wendy's brings in a heavy hitter to help kickstart momentum, and the snack rat might not have been everything McDonald's wanted it to be. Welcome to another episode of Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Editor-in-Chief Sam Oches, joined by my colleague, Executive Editor Alicia Kelso. Alicia, what is up?
What's up with you?
Oh, what's up with me? I don't know. I'm just overwhelmed with all the things that have to happen. We are heading to Nashville here in just a few days for Create, the event for emerging restaurateurs. I'm not going to belabor this. We talked about it a lot. So just know that October 15th, if you're listening to this and it's either the 13th or the 14th, you still have time. You can come join us in Nashville Wednesday to Friday. We are going to have a good time. It's going to be really one of the best events that you will ever have attended if you are an emerging restaurateur, because that's what we tailor all the content for. It is free. If you come, there's a registration fee, but if you come to Create, we will refund it. And look, you get to meet me and Alicia. And as we always say, we're a fun hang. Come hang with us. We want to see you. So register create.nrn.com. Anyway, that's why Alicia and I are so busy and have very little time to do anything, including making podcasts, which is why we're going to jump right into it. Alicia, something else we've talked a lot about recently is Domino's. And by the way, we're going to keep talking about Domino's, and there's a good reason for that. But before I get into that, we've got to talk about what they announced this week, which is its first major brand refresh in over a decade. The last time Domino's refreshed its branding was in 2012 when they introduced a sleeker new logo. Now Domino's has announced that they are incorporating new colors. Don't worry, still the blue and red, but new versions of the blue and red. They are incorporating a new font that they call Domino's Sans. And importantly, wait for it, Alicia. Wait for it, Alicia. Domino's. A new jingle. That's right. Domino's has a new jingle. And I'm going to wait.
You did it.
Domino's. Now that I can play sound effects on Extra Serving, all of you are in trouble.
That sounds like a Grammy-nominated artist.
And you would be right, Alicia. Very good guess. That was Shaboozey. He, everyone in the bars getting tipsy. Am I right about that? Or is that a rap song that came out like 15 years ago?
I think he pulled from that. Yeah.
He pulled from that. Okay, thank you. Look, I love Shaboozey, actually. He keeps popping up on my Spotify, and he's great. I do think it's a little funny that there's about 3 seconds of him there. But he's got a great voice for it. So, hey, if you need 3 seconds of somebody saying Domino's, he's a good one for it. Anyway, Alicia, what do you think about the brand refresh from Domino's?
I love it. I mean, here's what I like about it is refreshes are, a necessity. You got to do a refresh. You've got to do it not often, but not unoften. They typically generate 6 to 10% sales lifts based on some of the data that I've found and some anecdotes from some of our friends who have told me. Refreshes are not as deep as rebrands. So this is a different conversation than, the conversations that we've had about Cracker Barrel. There's still some relevance and overlap though, because the impetus behind Domino's refresh is to connect, quote, with future customers. And we're hearing that quite a bit from several brands. That was also the impetus, by the way, behind Cracker Barrel's rebrand, is this striving to connect with younger consumers. And look, we know that, younger consumers, specifically Gen Z, are going to wield more spending power than all of their predecessors combined by 2030. We know that they're far more frequent restaurant guests than their predecessors as well, than, you and I. And so that's why we're seeing these types of updates. Domino's, the way they did it was very subtle, very clean. It was a change. It wasn't a big change. It's not going to alienate its existing customers. And so I think that is why this was like, oh, very pleasant. Like, oh, look at it. Domino's looks good, and what I loved the most, and you actually have a deeper insight to this because you spoke with Kate Trumbull, their chief marketing officer, is they're putting food back in the center of their focus. They've been the technology company that sells pizza for what, over 10 years now. And so they're sort of trying to shift the focus back to the food after pushing the gas on technology innovation for the past 10 plus years. And that's great. I'm excited about this. It looks great. I've gotten really positive feedback on the posts that I've done on LinkedIn and TikTok. Nobody's turned off by this.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. I mean, it feels really fresh and modern. They say they wanted it to be bolder, have a little bit more personality. Kate mentioned that the font was inspired by, to your point about making food the center, it was inspired by their dough. That you'll notice there's sort of more of a roundness to the font that they're using. It's such a fascinating thing. And I asked Kate about this. So as we're teasing here, so Kate Trumbull, their global chief marketing officer, is speaking at Create later this week as you listen to it. She's speaking on October 16th. One of our general sessions, I'll be on stage talking to her about this brand refresh. So again, if you want to join us in Nashville, still time to do that. But you and I, Alicia, were in Ann Arbor a couple weeks ago, as we talked about here, doing some prep work for that and for the brand icon, which is going to be out on the same day that Kate and I take the stage at Create. We're going to drop that story at nrn.com. So be on the lookout for that. It's all about Domino's and how it has maintained just this status as an iconic brand. But I kind of tried to prod Kate a little bit because when we were there, remember, it was like a week after the Cracker Barrel stuff had gone down. And I had to ask about that because it's fascinating when you think Domino's. Remember, Domino's is the #1 pizza chain in the world by a lot as far as sales goes, by several billion dollars. And you know, they have 21,000 plus locations around the world. So to do anything that changes a brand, that's a big, big deal. And it was for Cracker Barrel too, even though Cracker Barrel has 700 or 800 locations. When you do something at that scale, it's just, you're going to have a lot of opinions on it. And I'm sure there are some detractors here. But, you know, Kate, of course, wouldn't comment on Cracker Barrel, nor would I have expected her to. But the one point she emphasized here was that they did a ton of research on this refresh. You know, she said they had hundreds of voiceover artists under consideration for doing this work. And that, you know, it's not something that they went into lightly. It is a big, big deal. They had a ton of data. They validated with consumers before going into this. By the way, I'm not calling into question what Cracker Barrel did because I assume they did a lot of that work too. The one interesting difference, I think, between a Cracker Barrel and a Domino's is that Cracker Barrel's was paired with a store redesign. Now, Domino's, last time they redesigned their stores was in 2012 with that brand refresh. The last one, they introduced the Pizza Theater prototype. But of course, Domino's does not have seats in its restaurants. You know, maybe a couple of them do, but Domino's is exclusively an off-premises brand. Even if you go in there to pick it up, you're eating it somewhere else. And so the point is that it's not a big deal if you redesign a brand. And I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but when you redesign the store for Cracker Barrel, that's where most people are spending their time associating themselves with Cracker Barrel. And that's a way bigger deal than if you're changing the font and colors of your logo and, you know, the design on your website. So, you know, it's a little bit apples, oranges here. But I do think, again, for Domino's to make this change with a lot of data to support that this is the direction to go, makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about the jingle. Hold on. But before I do that, I wanted to play it. What do you think about the jingle, Alicia?
It's amazing. I love it. I think it's so adorable. I love, you know, when we're talking about bringing the focus back to the food and we're simply stretching out that part, you know, that makes you pause a little bit. Oh yeah, Domino's is a good choice for family on Friday night. Domino. I just think it all makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's real, again, simple, and very clever. It doesn't go over the top on straying too far from who Domino's is.
You want to know? I want to tell you my favorite part. Ready? Domino's. That 2 snaps at the end. That's my favorite part. And I'll tell you why.
Because you're a percussionist.
Well, yes, I am a percussionist. And so, but here's the thing is, so Kate made the point, you know, that a jingle is something that's memorable. It sticks in somebody's mind, right? And Alicia, I'm sure you have this. I certainly have this. there are jingles from my childhood that still come back to me. You know, I can still do that Big Mac song, to all beef patty, special sauce, little cheese, pickles, onions, sesame seed bun, right? Like that is embedded in my brain, and I don't need it. It lives there rent free, but it comes back. and that's the point that Kate was making as to why they opted to go with a jingle, is because it's memorable, it's impactful, it's powerful. And I tell you that I like those two snaps because I can imagine kids out there hearing that jingle, and they, you know, the of course they're emphasizing the but then think about all those kids who have to do that snap, snap, right?
Yeah.
Like it might be simple and short. It's only 4 seconds, but you got to believe they had scientists working on this somewhere, right?
And I can corroborate because I showed my son, we're a Domino's family. We got one up the street. I played that song for he's 11 now, and he was excited because he had just learned how to really snap. Now he's been trying to do it without noise for, like 5 years. But he finally got it to the point where it's audible. So he was like doing it with the song. Mm-hmm. Now this is a Gen Alpha, that next generation of, you know, consumers that Domino's is striving to. I don't know if you get this at your house, but my kid is a BK have it your way jingle guy. Like I hear that, you know, I hear that BKs. I hear it all the time. So I like this point. I agree with you that there's probably some psychology behind it.
Yeah.
And this again goes along with that next generation of consumers, which I'm seeing a little bit more of, starting to take some notes on. Again, Domino's is not the only company that has mentioned that they're making changes for, quote, the next generation or future consumers. Wendy's just did that as well, by the way.
Good segue, Alicia. Wendy's is wanting their own refresh. Hang on, I got it.
Yeah.
I don't have a jingle for Wendy's. Sorry, Wendy's. If you want to send me a jingle, I'll throw it up here. May that be a lesson to all of you. I now can do sound effects. So if you want to send your okay, here's what we're gonna do. Let's do a contest. Alicia, I'm coming up with this in real time. So somebody tell me if this is a bad idea. I want restaurants to send me jingles, and we'll pick our favorite. We're gonna play it here on Extra Serving. There we go. Okay. You heard it here first. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to Wendy's.
Can we put some snippets from your band in there too, so everybody can hear Bananarchy?
We can get some Bananarchy up in here. Yeah, just I need to sit on that for a little bit and do it up. I need to do it up well because our audience deserves that in its fullest. I need to make sure I maximize the impact of that one. Okay, let's talk about Wendy's because you brought it up, and also because I have it listed here to talk about. Wendy's is in need of its own brand refresh, and it is hiring a heavy hitter to help it do that. Greg Creed, former CEO of Taco Bell and Yum Brands, and he's now a consultant. He's out there, but he's also still very much active. You and I see him all over LinkedIn. And by the way, just one of our favorite human beings in this industry. He's very humble, very funny, and very interesting, and obviously very, very smart. So Wendy's has hired him to consult on this project that they are calling Project Fresh. Wendy's, of course, has been struggling of late. Sales are down. And Kirk Tanner, their CEO of but 18 months, left a few months ago for Hershey. And there's just a lot of volatility there. Abigail Pringle, who was their president, she left in the wake of that. There's been some shakeups there at the executive level. Sales are down. Something needs to change. So Project Fresh, they hope for that to be the thing. Greg Creed is a great person to come in, by the way, and consult on this. The goals here, they say there are 4 pillars to this plan: brand revitalization, system optimization, operational excellence, and reallocation of capital and resources to drive profitable growth. Now, Alicia, I'm not that smart, but I'm smart enough to know that that's very vague. What do we think? What do we think is going to be key here to this Wendy's Project Fresh?
It's extremely corporate speak.
Extremely.
And I agree with you on the vagueness. So I don't know what to expect because of the corporate speak vagueness. You know, this sounds like a 4-pillar plan that anybody could put out. Hey, I'm wanting to turn around this company. So system optimization. Okay. So anyway, I don't want to be too cynical about this. Wendy's needs a kick in the ass. And, they have 2 negative quarters back to back. it seems like they're ceding some market share. They are underperforming all of their competitors except for Jack in the Box. It's almost like Burger King has a little bit of a tailwind and Wendy's has a little bit of a headwind right now. And so if you look at their stock, it's down over 50% in a year. What surprised me about this announcement, Sam, one, there's no permanent CEO. And that was shocking. They are still looking for a replacement, for Kirk Tanner.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Cook is in the interim role right now. Ken Cook was the CFO for less than a year.
Yeah, like 6 months.
That surprised me. Two, if you look at Wendy's stock yesterday after the announcement, it didn't budge at all. So it was just like, meh. And so what I like about the plan is, of course, Greg Creed. I think he's a genius. He's a giant. He's an industry icon. And, he has the potential that, this guy who came up with Live Más, who came up with Think Outside the Bun, who came up with relevant, easy, distinctive for Yum Brands, playbooks that will be used in this industry until the end of time, really. And he's like, to your point, he's just a likable, accessible guy. I reached out to him for a David Gibbs story on David Gibbs' retirement, and he responded almost immediately, like just accessible, nice, likable, and a genius. I think that has the potential to spark some momentum or at least excitement. Hey, this guy has done all this stuff and he's got this consulting company that has done all this stuff. We should listen to him and get behind whatever he puts out there, right? That is exciting. Two, I do like that they're reallocating $20 million away from just growing their footprint, to putting toward unit economic bolstering. Their AUVs, I think, are 2 million-ish, a little maybe above 2 million. They've been there for quite some time. We have talked on this podcast and elsewhere about maybe the need to pump the brakes a little bit on unit growth because consumers are not spending as much. They're kind of on the sidelines. And so let's bolster, growth inside the four walls. And I like that shift here. I wish more companies would do it instead of putting out big numbers on, we're going to be at X amount of restaurants in 2 years. I don't think this is the environment for that unless you have your AUVs in a solidly growing, trajectory, which it has not been the case for Wendy's.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, now's a good time to do that because a lot of companies are maxing out. I mean, 7,000 plus locations in the US for Wendy's. I mean, how much more real estate is there out there when you're up against 13,000 units McDonald's, 6,000 Burger King, maybe more. Point is that like at this point in time, like international growth is something that a lot of brands have been talking about, Wendy's included. And so that is a possibility for that external growth. But you're right on, Alicia, which is that what's the growth within the four walls? Because you've got a pretty good footprint here. So now how do you improve those restaurants? And if you look at a restaurant like a Chick-fil-A, which is still growing by quite a lot externally, but I mean, Chick-fil-A is so good about making this phenomenal high quality experience within the four walls. And that then helps sustain that unit count growth. And so I think a Wendy's is a good company that needs to look at something like that because, I mean, at the end of the day, Wendy's is playing the same ball game as McDonald's and Burger King. I mean, they've got some formidable competitors. What they have going in their favor is something like my family. My family is a Wendy's family. We choose Wendy's over McDonald's. No offense to my friends at McDonald's, but like I'm in Columbus. I'm a little biased. They're all over the place here. But, we like their food. We think it's distinctive as compared to a McDonald's experience. And we want to see more of that. But you've written about this, Alicia, this year, which is they've acknowledged there's too much noise going on. They've acknowledged they had too much stuff happening. They're throwing out new products left and right. They had the partnerships with Takis, and then the Addams Family. Gosh, why can't I think of the name of that?
Wednesday meal or something.
They got these things coming out here left and right. And look, there's one thing to do marketing, but there's another thing to just feel like you're throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. I want that tried and true Wendy's experience that I choose Wendy's over McDonald's for. That's why my son is always wanting to go to Wendy's because there's the otherness of what they offer. And the Wednesday campaign isn't going to do it for them, right? So anyway, I think this is a step in the right direction, but I think as you've kind of suggested here,
It could
action's
change.
better than talk. It's one thing to talk about it. Now do some actions, start putting some of these pieces into place.
But it could change.
Right.
I mean, they want to put a new CEO in place sooner than later. A new CEO could easily come in and be like, you know what, those 4 pillars are not where I want to go.
Yeah,
It's going to be they're going to be fighting up against a board that is committed and, committed to these pillars. Let's put the pillars in place. But that's another challenge altogether. You don't want the CEO and the board. I mean, are they just going to hire a CEO who is going to be on board with these? It seems very complicated to put out a strategic plan before a permanent CEO is in place, who will probably bring in their own people, who will, every new CEO puts in their own strategic plan. And I think that's going to be really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, you're right. It will be. And for a system this big and a brand this big, too much change can be a negative, as we all know. Now, you need to get it right. You also can't just stick with a failing plan because it's the one you most recently put in. But they're going to have to get this right for hope in the long run, because they can't keep cycling through, these brand plans every 18 months to 2 years. It just doesn't work with a system that big. All right, I want to briefly touch on, by the way, McDonald's. Again, am I a culprit to my friends at McDonald's? I hate McDonald's still. It's just Wendy's gets a little bit more of my business. McDonald's, though, had a big summer, and we were really excited about all things going on McDonald's because McDonald's introduced its snack wrap, which was a big deal. They put a lot behind this rollout of the snack wrap, that it had returned and it was going to be this big thing. Alicia, you've seen some data now that suggests it was not that big a thing that they hoped it could be. In fact, it may not have driven positive sales and traffic. Alicia, tell me more about that.
It did out of the gate. So the snack wrap obviously was really highly anticipated. It had been almost 10 years since this thing was on the menu. Petitions, social media, customers wanted it to come back, especially now where everybody wants a portable snack wrap and chicken. And so they did spend McDonald's did spend a lot of time building this up on social media channels. The launch date of July 10th, it generated, that first week after launch date was really strong, double digits, sustained that entire week. And this is something at the time McDonald's really needed, because if you'll recall, McDonald's had back-to-back negative quarters in Q4, driven highly by the E. coli outbreak last October, a year ago now, and Q1. They recovered really strongly in Q2. So this July launch, not only did they recover and were they positive, but the July launch was kind of riding the coattails of that momentum, right? Chris Kempczinski, their CEO, did caution. What interested me is, despite that recovery into positive sales territory in Q2 and outpacing its burger QSR competitors kind of significantly, Chris Kempczinski noted, basically cautioned, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The rest of the year looks a little, quote, choppy. And he sort of flashed a warning signal that consumers were, again, maybe pulling in a little bit more than they had been. Q2 may be anomalous in this broader environment. I don't know what their Q3 is going to look like. I know low-income consumers have continued to pull back, maybe even more so than they have been in the past several quarters, which does not bode well for McDonald's, which over-indexes on lower-income consumers. In fact, McDonald's started talking 2 quarters ago about how some of this selectiveness, sideline sitting, if you will, was starting to trickle into the middle class. And so I wanted to just kind of look at some of the traffic numbers of this snack wrap, this highly anticipated product launch. And it looks like it didn't really move the needle at all. In fact, traffic, according to Placer.ai, which is third party, to be fair, noted that their traffic has remained negative or turned negative in August, a month after the launch, and actually got a little bit lower throughout September. We're talking -4% to -5%. So those numbers that Placer sent me for McDonald's are not dissimilar to the QSR segment in general. And this isn't just Placer data. We have data from the National Restaurant Association, which shows 7 consecutive quarters of negative traffic in the industry. We have data from Revenue Management Solutions, which shows over a year of negative traffic in QSR specifically. The point is, I think the biggest point is, and you and I have talked about this, Sam, we have had a record number of limited time offerings launched in 2024 and the first half of 2025, according to Technomic data. That is not a silver bullet.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know what is.
There is none, right? I don't think there is.
Until we can reconcile menu prices to fit to be below wage increases have not kept pace with menu prices, and that until I think we correct that balance, we're going to have traffic issues. But that's also why we're seeing this play toward loyalty program. I mean, this is a ripple that flows into other topics like loyalty, so experience. So I think that's the impetus behind why I wanted to do that story. We're going to take one of the most anticipated launches from the beginning of this year. It came hot out the gate, and nothing is really moving a needle right now. And that is very frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for McDonald's. I'm sure it's frustrating for all of QSR. We just talked about Wendy's challenges. This is not a Wendy's problem. This is not a McDonald's problem. This is the conversation that we're having right now about the industry at large, give or take 3 or 4 brands.
Yeah, totally. Everybody's dealing with traffic. I don't think there is that silver bullet. I think you're absolutely right that there is a big part of this right now is prices. So yesterday I had a great conversation with Mike Burns, the CEO of And Pizza, which will be on an upcoming episode of Takeaway. But they're really leaning into that idea, much like some other brands are, but they were one of the first to kind of come out and say, hey, we're going to cut back and go to pre-COVID prices. Now, some have done that on a promotional level, and Pizza did that on a permanent level. I think that's really smart. Now, whether or not how much you use that in your marketing is kind of up to you. But in general, the problem right now is prices are too darn high. End of story. I think, Alicia, you and I as consumers are feeling this, right? It seems like every day my wife and I are talking about, hey, what are we going to have to pull off that grocery cart? Because holy cow, our groceries getting expensive. And we know that's the case with restaurants as well. Anyway, point is that until consumers feel better about what they're spending in restaurants, we're going to struggle with traffic. And they may go try your new product. You may get a little bump, to your point, Alicia, with a snack wrap, a new product, an LTO, discounted deal. But if you get stuck in this loop of just trying to do all this discounting in these deals and not, it's more like kind of diagnosing, you're not getting the proper diagnosis. You're just kind of treating the symptom. You need to recognize the diagnosis here is that people want to spend less money, period. And restaurants, I'm not so stupid to say that you should just go lower your prices, guys. What's going on? I realize that's really hard to do. Food costs are out of control. Labor costs are out of control. But I think that's got to be a big part of the puzzle here to figure out how can we keep prices from certainly getting any more expensive and give customers even just perceived value instead of some sort of novelty, something or other to try to get their attention. It's just not going to stick. Well, with that, Alicia, I wanted to pull us out of. It felt like things were getting a little too negative, and so I wanted to do that. Anyway, okay, it's time to move into our extra serving portion of the episode.
Thank you for that.
You're
I feel
welcome.
buoyant
Did I
now.
uplift your spirits?
Yes,
Okay.
you always do, Sam. You
I'm
find
so
a way.
glad. Okay, to jump into the extra serving portion of the episode, we're bringing in managing editor Leigh Anne Zinsmeister. Leigh Anne, welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Leigh Anne, before I start, I have one important point to make.
That's, I think, the 9th time he's played it, by the way, Leon. So
I retain my previous assessment that only the two of you have heard that that's not a jingle. That's just someone saying the word Domino's.
It's a soundbite. But you know what, Leigh Anne? It is a very fun one to play live on a podcast. And now that I know how to do that, I am going to keep doing it.
Fun for who?
At
Fun
least
for
me, and
Sam.
that's all that matters. So
Fun
long
for
as I'm
Sam.
in control.
Allow
All
me
right.
to extend my deepest apologies to our podcast producer.
Well, and there's a lot she's gonna have to deal with at the top of this episode anyway. Okay, well, and I'm also playing that to give us a little bit more good vibes because we gotta talk about some bad vibes here, Leigh Anne. We're gonna talk about bankruptcy. Now, we talked about bankruptcy last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago. So, Iron Hill filed for bankruptcy and closed all of its restaurants. What we wanted to talk with you today about, Leigh Anne, is the fact that, of course, that's not the only bankruptcy. Recently, there have been a lot more high-profile bankruptcy. Going back a couple of years, of course, you've got Red Lobster, TGI Fridays, On the Border, Bertucci's, Bar Louie. There's been a lot of bankruptcies. But, Leigh Anne, it seems to especially have impacted smaller brands, regional brands like an Iron Hill. My episode of Takeaway, by the way, this week is with Mark Cody, the CEO of Wild Wing Cafe and Backyard Burgers. I highly recommend anybody who's interested in just the concept of bankruptcy, how it works, what that looks like, go listen to that episode. He took those two brands through bankruptcy. They both emerged after 2 years. And he gets very specific on what that process is like. Those two, again, smaller, more regional brands. Leigh Anne, what's the problem here? Why is this kind of regional mid-sized brand suddenly seeming like such a big target of these bankruptcies?
Yeah. So first, a little more context. Iron Hill did file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is liquidation, hence all the closures. Also this month, mind you, it is currently October 10th. So when I say this month, I'm literally talking about in the last 10 days. We saw Razoo's Cajun Cafe file Chapter 11 and closed 3 restaurants. I believe they have 20 remaining. And in September, a chain called Opa filed for Chapter 7 as well, total liquidation, and Pinstripes filed for Chapter 11. So that's 4 regional chains in the last 6 weeks, basically. We actually got a lot of insight from the Razoo's filing in particular. They included a lot of detail about what they think has caused some of their problems over there. And one of the things that they're blaming is the bigger chains, specifically their recent value pushes. And I think, there might be something to that when the big guys like Chili's and Applebee's are suddenly discounting all these menu items because they're larger companies. They can afford to take a little bit more of a hit in that sense. And then you combine that with the nostalgia trend going on right now. People at home are saying, ooh, Chili's. I forgot about Chili's. Let's go to Chili's. Let's try that new queso. Let's do the 3 for me. And it's drawing consumers away from the smaller chains. Another thing that is impacting, I think, a lot of these chains in particular is that a lot of regional chains tend to be more specialized. And so Razoo's, for example, struggled with seasonality. Their customers come in during crawfish season. Can't tell you when that is, but it's not all year long. Mm-hmm. And if crawfish season changes, so in 2025, they said it was earlier than it was in 2024, it impacts their business harder than it would impact a bigger chain that might have one crawfish dish, as opposed to relying on it. Razoo's full name is Razoo's Cajun Cafe. That's what they do. Another example of that is Planta, which filed for bankruptcy in the spring and recently emerged. But, they specialize in plant-based vegan food. They have a smaller market to begin with. And so when consumers start pulling back, those more specialized chains, which tend to be smaller and regional, are going to feel the impact more broadly. I do want to call out some numbers that Alicia recently reported on, that bankruptcies are down across the board. This is not an industry-specific problem. Alicia, not to take your thunder here, all the credit to you for this research, but bankruptcies across all industries are up 11.5% over last year, which is the highest rate since 2010. You may recall 2010, not a great time for the economy. So that is where we're at currently.
Yeah, Alicia and I just got done talking about McDonald's and how the snack wrap really wasn't the boost that they wanted, and how, the problem really here seems to be that just in general, the consumer is sick and tired of paying a lot of money for stuff, and so they just are pulling back, and there's no silver bullet in getting them to come back. So you can't throw a snack wrap out there and say, hey, you coming back now? It's just in general, prices are too darn high and the consumer does not want to go back. So it just seems like that's going to impact everybody. But I appreciate the point you make here, Leigh Anne, that it's going to impact everybody, but especially if you're in the more of this specialized kind of business, you're even a bigger disadvantage because already the consideration for your brand may be smaller than a McDonald's. And so now it's kind of getting the boot. Now, I have to wonder, though, because we've seen a lot of independent restaurants close in the last, 2 years, call it. And it just seems like a lot of companies have not been able to come back from COVID. I mean, just going back to 2020, it just wiped out the business for so many smaller businesses. And it just seems like a lot haven't come back from that. Does that seem right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of businesses, don't forget, a ton of businesses folded to begin with,
Totally.
in 2020, 2021. A lot of businesses held on. But the fact that we're seeing the economy struggle again, the fact that consumers are struggling right now with unemployment and whatnot, a lot of these businesses just can't take two massive hits like this back to back, essentially. I mean, it's only quote unquote been 5.5 years since the massive blow of COVID. And so to start to claw your way back from that, and then all of a sudden people are losing jobs, people just don't have the money to spend, they're pulling in their spending, even if they are employed. I mean, if you haven't come 100% back from the first hit, then it's going to be harder to fight the second.
Yeah, it's going to take a major economic shift to get things back to that positivity. Alicia, I want to bring you in because you have obviously written about this too. What do you make of these bankruptcies? And I mean, it's our suspicion, isn't it, that we're probably going to see some more bankruptcies before things are said and done here in 2025?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, no question. I think there's a confluence of things that are happening here. To both of your points, bigger brands are more insulated right now in this kind of environment. You can get more favorable contracts on things like tech, on things like food costs, on things like delivery. I think that can't be overstated. And I think that's why these regional chains and independent chains in particular are struggling more than their scale means everything in an environment like this. The National Restaurant Association does a really good job of outlining all the cost increases since pre-COVID, February 2020. And I think, to sort of piggyback off of Leigh Anne's point as to why these struggles, we can't shake them since COVID 5.5 years ago. That's why the restaurant industry is completely different. It won't go back. So the operating model that we had in February of 2020 is no longer as viable as it was. And it's not just food inflation, though that is obviously, one of the three biggest cost increments. But rent, labor, we're talking things like energy, things that used to be 3% are now 6%. The P&L looks completely different than it did in 2019, and we're not going back. Even if food costs come down a little bit, even if we figure out, if we plateau on labor costs, if we are able to figure out really effective, efficient technologies to save on some of those costs like energy, to ease some of this P&L burden, we're not going back to 2019. And so if we can't, the brands that don't have the wherewithal, the infrastructure, basically the people resources to figure out how to navigate that new P&L, if you will, this new era, they're going to struggle. I want to know too, you can't just try and figure out how to navigate this new P&L. I can't think of a more creative thing to call it. You can't figure out how to navigate this new P&L just by taking out debt.
Right.
And Iron Hill was more than $20 million in debt with $125,000 cash. You can't just take out debt because we're not going back. We have to figure out a different way out here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point about Iron Hill. Going back, Alicia, to what we were talking about with the snack wrap. Iron Hill, we just gave them a Menu Masters Award because they did this huge menu revamp last year. And now that we can look at this retroactively, we can see that, that was probably kind of a Hail Mary there, that the writing may have been on the wall, and that they were trying to do, a big shakeup to jumpstart something. And again, I think it's just another sign to say, like, you can't just hope and pray that a new menu item, a marketing campaign, a deal is going to be the thing to pull you out of whatever trouble you're in. It's going to be a multi-layered issue. Again, I would highly recommend people go listen to the takeaway episode. Selfishly, I want you to go listen to it anyway. But it really is a great point. Mark Cody, a CEO of Backyard Burgers and Wild Wing Cafe, he says a couple things that I thought were really pertinent here. And he says, first off, he said, nobody wants you to fail. You don't go into the bankruptcy process with all of the people as part of that wanting you to fail. They all want to just to see you through the process, and they don't want you to come back. The goal is to set you up for success so that you then emerge into a more optimistic, positive future. And that at the end of the day, you can't see this as the sky's fallen, you have failed, this is all doom and gloom. Bankruptcy, yeah, it's kind of it's nobody wants to get into bankruptcy. It's kind of a last resort. But, for those that file for Chapter 11, where, and not the liquidation of Chapter 7, the goal is ultimately to improve your business and try to find some solutions and set you up for success in the future. So I guess the point there is to say that, if this is something, if you're in this position where you don't know what else to do, and that's something that you're avoiding because it just seems too scary or too much like it's failure, just know, like, there is a way that it can get you to a better, positive future. And for all of those who are not yet there to where you're going for the last ditch effort, just know that, something, a huge Hail Mary, like a new menu in this climate is not going to be the thing, unfortunately, to pull you out. It's probably going to have to be some sort of multifaceted plan. Do you know what I think we need right now? You know what I think we need?
Please don't do it.
I just wanted to feel better about everything for
Need some Shaboozey.
I needed some Shaboozey in my life. I needed that. All right, that's all we got for today. Leigh Anne Zinsmeister, Alicia Kelso, as always, thank you.
Stratus Foods is the industry partner you can depend on when you're looking for the very best in fats and oils. Our team of expert researchers, developers, and innovators have helped countless businesses just like yours bring their delicious menus to life. With products that are reliable, sustainable, and ready to meet any challenge, you can fry, bake, saute, and grill with confidence. Stratus Foods, we've got you covered.